Briefly, I'm Joshua Shin. I'm one of the English instructors on campus. I'm also the library committee chair, excuse me. This is a library committee event. But since it is a women's history event, I suppose I, as a male, should hand it over to our female moderator, Kathy Brewster, and she will introduce our wonderful panelists.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you to the Library Committee for taking the initiative to put together a great event like this. We have a very, very distinguished group of panelists today, and so I will actually start at this end closest to me. This is the Honorable Dorothy Nash Holmes. She was elected to the Reno Municipal Court as a judge in 2010, and she was reelected in 2016. She presides over the treatment courts for people with addictions and deals with mental illness and homeless inebriants, as well as her regular duties with misdemeanor crimes. She has practiced law for more than 33 years, the majority of time as a prosecutor. She has been an assistant United States attorney out of San Francisco and Reno, where she prosecuted international narcotics traffickers. And many of you may know her from her term as being the Washoe County District Attorney. Next to her is Tina Ruff, Dr. Tina Ruff. She is the Director of Athletics for Truckee Meadows Community College. Woo! She is determined to create a lasting legacy of athletics at TMCC. She was a 3-sport athlete at Reed High School, played collegiate softball at Arizona State, and she was a walk-on to the team and then got a scholarship. She became a 2-time academic All-American and a 2-time team captain. She graduated from ASU. She has her doctorate from the University of Nevada at Reno, and she was also a softball coach at UNR and at Minnesota State University in Mankato. Next to her is, I'm going to get my list here, is Suzanne Malik, also from TMCC, where she is a librarian. She holds a master's degree in library and information science and has worked in academic libraries. Many of you from TMCC know her because of the wonderful work she has done with genealogy and family history. She has really put Reno and TMCC on the map with her open genealogy labs, and she does public presentations throughout the community and other places as well, and is a component and a believer in lifelong learning. I'm having to look at my list here. Next to her is Amanda Burton, and Amanda actually brought some handouts for us today. She has some gifts for you as you are leaving. She is the publisher and editor of Edible Reno Tahoe. So some of you may have seen that magazine around town, and it celebrates the local food and drink movement. And it is a magazine with a mission. All of these women have great missions, and her goal is to point us to more nutritious and healthy food sources and to stimulate the local economy. She is also very involved in the TED Talks that take place at UNR. And that is one of the most prestigious TED Talks, TEDx conferences in the country, based on the millions of video views that it gets. So she has many, many activities that she's involved with the community. Okay.
Hi.
Hi. I'm just seeing who is, I should probably move over there so I could see. Our next presenter, next to Amanda, is Karen Vibey. She is the Senior Vice President of Investments for Morgan Stanley. She's been in Reno for 20 years. She has a master's degree from UNR. She is also a percussionist for the Reno Philharmonic Orchestra. But she really has found herself in the male-dominated world of finance as an investment manager and has had to handle the stereotypes of being in a girl with a bunch of guys. She believes that women need to be financially aware and financially solvent for themselves, and that's how she was called to the job that she now does. Next for us as a speaker is, I'm going to be organized here. Sorry. Elizabeth Cassidy, and she is the Director of Human Resources for Patagonia. Many of you know Patagonia. She is with the Reno Service Center, which is the operational hub of Patagonia. She started there 14 years ago when they had 170 employees, and now they have 800. Prior to for joining Patagonia, she has worked as a ski bum, and she also went on to earn her MBA from the College of William and Mary in Virginia. She moved back to California to follow her Hollywood dreams and work for Warner Brothers in the feature film department. But then there was the dot-com boom, and that inspired her to make a move to Seattle, where she worked for a small startup company called Amazon.com. And we have a video presentation for our lady who is on the end here. I'm going to introduce her, and then you'll see more about her. Ruth Ebens is a kayaker, and she started her kayaking adventures on the shores of the Ottawa River in Canada. She spent most of her life doing competitive kayaking, and then she came to Reno. She is the 2007 World Freestyle Kayak Champion. She is no stranger to the podium. She has won silver and bronze awards too. And when she isn't working for Patagonia Canada, there we are with Patagonia again, she can be found on a river or on her mountain bike or probably this year on skis or chasing her toddler. So we have a video.
Look at you, that's my old name.
Oh. That's okay.
Oh. Hurts already? No, thank you.
Oh no.
Different than the Truckee.
What's that?
Different than the Truckee.
Yeah. I've seen you in the Truckee.
Super nasty.
So the format of today, so you can see we have an amazing group of women who are going to speak to us today. Yay! A great variety of experiences. So, esteemed panelists, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving up your time. Obviously, you're all very busy and involved women. So, we have 5 questions for our panelists today. Plan to leave plenty of time for questions for the audience or for you to circle back around and maybe respond to somebody else or say something that you thought about. And how I'm going to do this, each one of you has a microphone, and so when you start talking, it will hopefully work, and everyone can hear you. And so for each of the 5 questions, I'll ask the question, we'll give 10, 12, 15 minutes, and then if you see me pop up, then it's about time to move on to the next question. You do not. No, we're not going to do this today. And anyone can just start talking. We don't have to, go in line. We can do what's called popcorn. So we can just do popcorn. So our first question is, what challenges do you feel women face in our day and age?
Well, if nobody's going to talk, I guess I'll talk. I think probably one of the ones that are probably most common today are age discrimination. It's really amazing throughout a woman's life how many times she'll find herself in a position of being looked over, passed over, not chosen at every point in their life. And I'm sure probably many women in this room, if they haven't already experienced it, will experience it at some point in their life. And it's amazing that at each point in your life, when you start realizing that you've been, considered less than what a male would be able to provide to the job. But probably at the end of your life, it's kind of like the hardest part is when you realize that age discrimination really is alive and well in our country today. I experienced it myself about 2 years ago before I came to this position. I went for an interview locally, and I thought I scored well. I thought I did well. And then I wasn't chosen. And when I wasn't chosen, I thought, well, that's okay, because maybe there was just a better candidate. Then it just turned out that one of my neighbors happened to know the person who interviewed me. And the person who interviewed me didn't know that person was my neighbor. And they passed on to my neighbor that, they passed me up because they didn't want to have to go and redo the interview again 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road because of my age. So that was something that just really struck me. And by the way, the person was female who said this. So, female on female discrimination at age is also alive and well. Luckily, I just decided, well, that's not an organization I would have wanted to work at anyhow with that kind of an attitude. And I was lucky enough to get this position here. But it was definitely an eye-awakening experience for me to realize that at this point in time, even women will discriminate against women.
I think what comes to mind for me is a shocking kind of data that women who graduate from college have the same earnings potential. And then about age 27, it starts to become a gap. And the reason why data shows is usually around age 27 is when women start having children. And so women have to, unless they work for a company like Patagonia that has on-site childcare, women usually have to make a choice between raising a family, stepping off their career track in order to have that difficult choice of family first, versus, and then try to get back into their careers and pick up where they kind of stepped off the track. So I think that's still a major challenge, and I don't difficult for women when they want to try to have both. And it's very, very telling that age 27 is kind of where it all starts to happen. So.
Also, I think single mothers are really, it seems like there's never going to be a point in their life where there aren't obstacles to overcome, especially, if they voluntarily, I had a coworker who had done sperm donation, and she chose to be, a single mother, and just trying to work her life around being a single mother with absolutely no form of other support, not just, in terms of financial, but also in terms of just running the home. She ended up having to take a lot of time off work, and it did jeopardize her job, even though she was working in the education field, because the child the sperm donation actually didn't work for her. She ended up going into what's called foster-adopt, where she fosters a child first and then gets to adopt the child as time goes on. And her job really became endangered because of all the time she had to take off to go to court, to try to adopt that child, dealing with parental experiences. The other people were giving up their rights. So there's a lot of challenges, for a career woman if she chooses to split her time between career and family.
I'll jump in and say something about that. I've been practicing law. Well, I started law school, 40 plus years ago. I went to law school at night because I worked in the daytime and had a child. And I remember our dean saying to us, look to the left, look to the right, because, 2/3 of the people are going to be gone here before. We had 120 people that graduated in our class, and the top 10% of the class was almost all women. Nowadays, they have 50% of the law school classes are women, and yet trying to be taken seriously in the profession, whether it's to get into a partnership, whether it's to get a trial job, whether it's to get elected to Congress. I wish I could say that I have seen things improve greatly over the years, but a few decades back we had Anita Hill, and just this year we had the whole Kavanaugh hearings that was just a replication of the same thing. So I think one of the biggest issues with women in a profession, let alone a man's profession, who said it was men, but is being taken seriously and having it accepted, besides the fact that we only make 70 cents on the dollar, is that we can do the same or better job, no offense, guys, but as a man. When my daughter was 3, when I started law school, and my then husband, went to pick me up, and I got in the car, and Vicki said, "Mommy, what are all these daddies doing here?" And I said, "Why?" And she said, "I thought law school was for mommies."
That's awesome.
Not exactly.
I think for me in college athletics, because that's pretty much where I've grown up, in my professional career, is everyone knows that pretty much in the administrative roles, it's a male-dominated area. And I think trying to apply for positions and apply for jobs, what I have found, and I don't know if you guys have found this across applications, is females are perfectionists, especially when you're at our level, and we are always looking at every bullet point of what we have to meet for that job application. If we don't meet it, we won't apply. There are men out there literally that will say, "I can do that job," and they will throw their name in the pot. And so I think sometimes if you don't have the exact skill, look at the transferable skills that you have and have that confidence of applying for that job, because I'll tell you the other side is, and they're going for jobs. So the job applicant pool is probably 5 women to 25 men. So don't be afraid to put because those are just some of the challenges. And I don't know, I don't want to speak for you guys, but those are some of the challenges we face.
I just wanted to say thank you for having a 3-year-old and going to law school, because I think that's really impressive. I have a 4-year-old and I can't imagine, but to me, the expectation that society puts on us right now as a parent and a working mother, you are supposed to be really good at your job and really good at home. You need to make the organic snacks and pack a really great lunch and bring the best thing to the bake sale, but you also have to be on call for your job 24%, 25, 100% of the time. So I just think it's interesting, that balance, like society expects that the mothers are going to do that. The dads really can kind of get off the hook. Oh yeah, he packed a pre-made lunch. It's not a big deal. It's just the dad. But yeah, there's definitely people looking at the mothers, making, having that expectation that we are doing all of the things.
I applaud your company for having childcare. That is beautiful.
Me too.
Yeah, Ruth's daughter's in our childcare center. She's one of the first babies. And the company, Patagonia, has had on-site childcare for 40 years. And because of that, we have 50-50 equity in managerial roles. We have a female CEO, not that she ever came through the ranks of the company, but it's just so vital to our culture to have the kids here and at work. And so Ruth is able to come back to work and still have quality time with her daughter. And I don't think there's ever, you can't measure the return on investment because Ruth was able to spend time to see her walk for the first time if it was happening here, you know? I mean, there's like, you better get down here now, you know? And she's running across the warehouse to get to see her daughter. So I think that is super valuable and keeps the 27-year-olds still, you know, in their careers and coming back to work. And, you know, our CEO said in response to, well, how do you get so many women managers and vice presidents in your company? And she's like, well, start with on-site childcare, you know, because I think that's really important. The nursing moms are able to come back to work. So
I had a discussion with my coworkers the other day about taking a work trip, and my coworker said, does this week work for you? And I said, well, it's my kid's birthday and my mom's coming to visit. And he just looked at me and he's like, isn't it awesome that we work for a company that we can say that out loud and we're not shunned? Yeah. He's like, quite frankly, I think that's amazing and I'll totally respect that. And I just thought that was a great conversation because he was my senior as well. He easily could have looked at me and said, yeah, whatever. But he was like, yeah, we can totally work around that. And that was such a great moment for me as a parent to be like, thank you for understanding.
Well, I had a situation, and I guess probably most people will face it sooner or later, when my mother was at the end of life, and I had to take a large chunk of time off through family leave, and luckily I had a boss who was understanding. But I know a lot of employers aren't as understanding. So that was a big challenge in my own career, was trying to figure out at the end of life of a parent, how do you coexist between your obligations for work and your obligations at home. And I do know having that family leave was very, very, very important to me. And certainly I could have used longer to spend more time with her. But definitely the time I had was very much appreciated. And that was a real challenge that I had to overcome. And like I said, everybody in this room sooner or later will face that. And finding an employer who was understanding of your obligations at home, to me, was very, very important in my career.
And I'd just like to talk a little bit about sexual discrimination. I think that it's pervasive, especially in the food and drink world. We did a big story a while back on some of our top food producers here, top female chefs, and they talked about all the stories that they underwent when they were trying to work their way up through the ranks in the kitchens. They really had to endure quite a bit from the male chefs because it is a male-dominated profession, which is kind of strange when you think about it. You think of the woman being in the kitchen, quote unquote, but in the restaurants, it's really the men who dominate. So women who are just as good as the men are really struggling to try and make it. And you'll have to give this a read. I'll put that up there, and you guys can also read it online, but it's really, really fascinating. And everyone's already pretty much mentioned some of the other obstacles, but as a journalist, I've definitely experienced it over the last 20-some years, trying to work my way up. The men were always paid more, and I was kind of dismissed as the little woman, and I couldn't get the top news stories, and I couldn't get the top jobs. The men always got those, unfortunately. And it's the same for the women in local food here, too. I think they really struggle.
I'll just make a comment in my workplace, essentially just discussing stereotypes between generations and what perhaps your boss may have as an idea of the success path that you should do because this is how they earned their success in their career versus perhaps the new hire, male or female, that just works differently and thinks differently and is going to go about that same success path, but it's going to be their path. And I think oftentimes as you get into the workforce and you get hired, being the person that communicates your vision on how you're going to construct your business, depending on which workforce you get into, is a very good idea, I think, because if you are interviewing with somebody who has the idea that you're going to be in the office in your chair 12 hours a day, and your idea of perhaps constructing your business is to be in the office maybe 2 to 3 hours a day and then going out and earning that business outside of the office, those types of things are very key going forward, so that not only are you not upset with perhaps your mentor or your supervisor because you think that they're old school or they don't know how the world works today, and they're looking at you saying, you're a slacker, where are you? I don't see you in the office, so therefore you're not working. Those are also crossovers that we see as well. So when you get hired or when you're interviewing for a job, sometimes it's a good question to ask and say, what are your expectations? What are your expectations of me, and how do you view success? And by the way, hopefully getting that same question back, and here's my idea of what I'd like to do, and does this work environment support new ideas other than your idea? So just something to kind of think about there, and I think those who have communicated that in our business, male or female, their road in the first year is a little bit easier than, hey, where's so-and-so, and how come they're not here at 6:15 opening the office?
Karen, that is a great segue to the next question. And the next question is, how do all of you go about creating balance in your life among all of your various commitments, including work?
I'm going to say the first thing, which is wake up early. And maybe the rest of you can agree or not agree, but I think that seems to be the best way to start your day, and probably the only way to fit everything into the day is wake up early.
The one thing I've noticed is 20 years ago, I didn't so much bring home my work, but now I do. It seems like work never, the work day doesn't, it seems like 24/7, because, with access to home email and ongoing projects and, different ways to communicate that weren't available 20, 30 years ago, time management has become probably the top thing for me about trying to find that balance. Because being that I'm the kind of person who always wants to be in touch with those that that are at work who need me for whatever reason, especially students. I communicate a lot with students on evenings and weekends. Time management, you got to find that balance between family and work, and to the point where you're not on work 24 hours a day. And so for me, that's the number one thing is time management.
Yeah, I just have to echo that. That's my number one issue, is trying to carve out the time to enjoy nature, enjoy exercise, enjoy life. And you just really have to make yourself, because I'm a workaholic perfectionist as well. And I still wake up early. I wake up at 5, 6 a.m., but I just go to my computer because I work for myself, and I don't often leave the house. This is actually rare for me to be out in public, usually chained to the desk. So it's so important to find that balance and allow yourself the time for yourself. I think that's so key.
I'll just add one thing to that. I do believe that we are more distracted than ever with everything else, with all of the technology. And I can only speak for me, but I will say that the balance in my life was really starting to go in the right direction when I made it a point to be present wherever I was. So if I'm here on this panel, I'm not looking at my iPhone going through my emails. If I am carving out 60 minutes to work out, that 60 minutes of time is very intense, and I am sweating for 60 minutes. I'm not going through my phone or answering emails or on a call with a client. And so for me, it's compartmentalizing my time actually saved me a lot of time, because then I knew that I could be very intense in the moment that I was in and give myself 100%. So one thought.
It's kind of easy to talk about that. I have to confess, I've never been good at that. After law school, I was a single mom for about 10 years, and in starting and being a prosecutor in a male profession, and I had to do on-call where I had to go out at 3 a.m. to murder scenes and whatever, and you pick your daughter up and you take her to grandma's house and put her on the couch and you do all this. But I was absolutely determined never to miss anything. I coached my daughter's softball team. I did this and that. I thought I was wonderful. By the time she was 25, she was still cussing me out for missing things in her life. But as a workaholic, as an A person, as a woman who had to do twice as good as a man in everything that they were doing, it's hard as hell. And I finally told my husband, my current husband, who's 36 years now, he's been around for a while, but I finally told him, I do not take a break and call in the middle of the day to tell you how I'm doing. So get over it. I just don't do that. I am very focused on my job. I get in there and I am buried in my work. And that's true whether I was a lawyer or at Department of Corrections or as a judge. It just, when I'm there, I'm doing this. So I hope you're having a nice day. I'll talk to you about it when I get home. But a lady lawyer a long time ago told me that balance is not keeping it this way. It's this way, this way, this way, this way, and overall having a balance maybe for the whole month. One whole week could be unbalanced as heck, and the other could be a little of this and a little of that. But I, as a prosecutor, as the DA of Washoe County, I would have to tell the men as much as the women, get a life. Go home. I know you're excited. It's easy. It's cool when you get to do a murder trial and you go out and you do all these fancy things. But I could see them being worn down by the job and the emotion of the job and things as much. And I said, you have to take vacations. You have to get out of here. Like I said, I'm not very good at doing that, but I'm good at knowing I'm not doing it and telling people about it.
Yeah, I think for me, I just kind of had an aha moment when I was trying to do it all and get up at crack of dawn and be the amazing mother that I thought I was going to try to be, and work and I just decided to prioritize differently. So now I'm prioritizing skiing over laundry. And, I don't really care what my house looks like. And, if my neighbors stop by, I'm not going to be embarrassed. I'm just going to let them come in and have a great conversation regardless. So I just kind of prioritize things a little bit differently than that idealistic, perfect woman that has it all. Because, I've learned that it's exhausting if you try everything perfect. So
I just try to turn down the negative self-talk because I'm in that boat. Like, there's a lot of negative self-talk. It's constant every day about you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to be available to everybody. And so I think as I've grown older, getting older, and I'm evolving, because we all evolve no matter what and what time of what age we are, we're always trying to be better at what we're doing. And I think I'm trying to really try to be present and really, this thing is my life right now because I'm building a program here.
You want to give that to me?
No, I haven't even looked at it. But I also have it here. So like we're always distracted. There's always something going on, whether it's on the dashboard of our car or it's on our watch or it's whatever. But I'm just really trying to, like you guys were talking about, is just minimize the distractions because they're all over the place. So
That is true. Especially with so many devices, like everywhere I go, I have a device with me, whether it's the iPad, the iPhone, the Air Mac. I mean, it's like, I find myself going everywhere in my life with a unit of some sort of communication. And then you stop and you say to yourself, wow, this is like not healthy. It's just like you got to start like you said, compartment, put things in a compartment and say, if I'm going to do my exercise, I'm going to do my exercises. If I'm going to do my work, I'm going to do my work. But that's something I myself have to really make an effort at.
well, we're the queens of to-do lists.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's transaction,
Yeah.
and what can I get done? And so sometimes I just have to be at peace with tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
How many women in this room have to-do list every day? I mean, I have one every day of my life. And then I have the calendar, the to-do list on my calendar at home. I have a big wall calendar. And then the ones I didn't do in this month get carried over to the beginning of the next month.
And you have an alarm on your phone.
Yes.
Remind you.
Yeah, reminders.
I have a question for the panel, which is, like everyone goes on vacation, and you think that's your reset. How many of you have actually gone on a vacation where you have no internet service, et cetera, for the last couple of years? Because for the last couple of years, service is available pretty much everywhere you go. But I've done a couple of backpacking trips and a couple of rafting trips that have taken me fully off the grid, and I can't tell you how calming that is to literally leave it behind. And you can't see what's going on. There's no service. And talk about being present. You have to be present. You have to be present in making a meal or contributing to the group, whatever it is. But yeah, I would highly recommend that if you have the opportunity to go somewhere where you literally have to unplug.
Downeyville.
Yeah, good call. Good call. Yeah, good call.
No reception there.
Actually, it's the first thing we do whenever we plan a vacation is there internet service? That's the first question. Got to have that internet
I know.
service.
I mean, we're addicted to it, right? Like, it's so crazy. You want to know. You're like, but they need me. But really, if you unplug for a few days, you'll realize they'll be okay.
Survive.
It's so crazy.
Thank you. The next question is, what challenges did you face early in your career, and how did you overcome them?
I shouldn't laugh, I'm sorry. I was only the second woman in the district attorney's office hired, and the first woman married a justice. She was in the appellate division because they would let women write, but didn't want them to be doing trial work in court. And she married a justice on the Supreme Court. So as everybody said, oh, she married up. So when they hired me a couple of years later to do criminal, I got more crap. Don't do what she says and marry up, you know? I mean, I had to work and work and work. But they put me in the juvenile division at first. They put me in the civil division. I had to work my way up through jobs that men got to skip over. And I wish that Me Too had come, 40 years ago instead of recently, because I can more fingers than I can count the things that I had to go through being the only woman in the office. And years later, when I'm the district attorney and I have an assistant district attorney, and by now men are in my office who have changed diapers on their kids, they didn't used to do that, and men have obligations as well, it was a real change of pace to have them recognize family obligations as important ones too. I mean, when people gave me a lot of crap because they, you probably never even shot a gun before, what did I have to do? I had to go out to the shooting range and shoot up a target and come hang it on the wall in my office so they could see that I could shoot a gun. I mean, there was a lot of having to prove yourself over and over again. And I hope it's not that way still. I don't know that it is. There are more women prosecutors than there used to be. There's more women in Congress than there used to be, but still a very small number. A lot of things.
One of my interesting stories is early on in my career, I worked for a financial institution in Boston. And this is the typical financial institution back then where you had to wear a wool suit with a fake women's tie way back when. And a guy in the corner office, his name was really JB. And I was applying for business school to get my master's, and I asked one of the women financial analysts to write a recommendation for me. And she was really not helpful. And in such a way that it made me really feel bad, that I belonged in just the secretary pool kind of situation. And I learned that some women aren't going to be helpful in my career. But I also decided at that point that that's not going to be me. I think there's room for women in all levels and in all companies. And there's room for all of us. And why aren't we helping each other more? And so one of the things that I'm doing at Patagonia is I have a small group of future women leaders, and we have a women in leadership group, and then we talk about stuff and we help each other. And yesterday we watched the Ruth Bader Ginsburg movie. I mean, that's very inspirational, but things like that where quiet down the negative voices, things like that, that I find really valuable. So anyway, so that's one of the things that I remember very distinctly. It's like, wow, she's really not being helpful at all. And I'm saying that nicely. But yeah.
I'm totally sorry to hear your experience, but it's kind of unfortunately common. I would say, just as a comment for me, to really take a look at what your strengths are. So coming into the financial services industry, for me, I had zero experience. My master's degree is in classical music. So if there could be anything so far off a black swan success event, I think that perhaps I fulfilled that, certainly for the firm. But coming into the business, and what is it that I have that would be, essentially make me successful versus everybody else that's already there. I essentially used my differences and the uniqueness of who I am to go out and get the business that nobody else was getting. So targeting women, targeting the gay community, targeting musicians in the entertainment industry, those are areas that I'm very familiar with. And I can control my contact. I may not be a wizard yet at financial investing or know one thing from the next, but I sure learned, and through that process of learning, I just focused on the things that I knew and the things I could control, which is, great, you don't like that guy that you're working with as a financial advisor because he ignores you or whatever the issues are. I'm not that person, and I truly am not. So it was a win on that situation, and really focusing on what you can do versus trying to mold into a process that perhaps you could never fit in to do. Okay.
I would say overcome your fear and self-doubt. That, for me, that was the biggest challenge, I think, for myself in my career. Fear that maybe you're not good enough, or fear that maybe you won't be able to fulfill what your boss would like you to do. So what I did little bit by little bit in my own career is just started saying yes when I would normally have said no to an assignment. And if I didn't know how to do that assignment, I simply went and found out how to do it. Being a librarian, that kind of came pretty easy to me. But with the advent of the internet, because believe it or not, I was a librarian before there was such a thing as internet. And once with the internet, there's really not anything that you can't quickly at least get a familiar sprinkling of what you need to do. So for me, if I could say my biggest challenge has just been overcoming self-doubt. And just saying, yes, I can do that, and actually being able to fulfill that, and feeling better about yourself afterwards. And it makes that next assignment a whole lot easier. And the more often you can say, yes, I can do that, the more you're recognized. The more you recognize, the better your career comes, and sometimes big steps, sometimes little steps. But for me as a woman, doubt was something that I really had to work at as a challenge.
And I would just say, from my experience, I can't think of any specific stories from my early employment history. I just remember it was pervasive, where if a man was hired, a young man was hired, he was often the one to get the big story. He was often the one to get the raise. I really had to fight all the time for my salary, for better stories, for anything. So that was really difficult. But to your point about saying, is it still happening today? It definitely is. I mean, there are male chauvinists out there. Just last month, I have two businesses. I have Edible Sacramento and Edible Reno Tahoe, and we're selling Edible Sacramento. And I went to see a business broker, a male, and he talked to me in these hushed tones like I wouldn't understand, and he was going through the numbers very, very slowly, and I wanted to slap him. And then on top of that, he said, well, we're going to put a woman on selling your business because your business is, more of a woman sort of business, like a female focus. I just ran screaming from there. He made my skin crawl. But so there are these people out there that are from another time, I think, because how could they not be with the times where we should all be equal? And so anyway, I just wanted to give you that example. Still out there.
I have like a last 2-3 years story at my former employer. So, I was an assistant athletics director, and I got elevated to an associate, so it's just a level up. But I was asking for a salary increase because I was taking on more sports and more opportunities and stuff, and so I was really worried about asking for that. But I just said, I'm just going to ask. Well, it took a little while for me to get it, but it was like, Tina, that comes with responsibility. okay, I think I have more responsibility. Okay, so what you're saying is that I'm kind of, you don't really see this as, it's just kind of like a title change. It's not really, okay. So as we move forward, then another area is hiring 2 assistant athletic positions. And it's basically a job that I had done before, and they split it, and they're hiring these individuals at an assistant AD level. I'm an associate AD level, and they're making $25,000 more than I am. And I was like, I went to the admin assistant and I said, I just saw these job postings and I really want to talk to Doug. And I went in there and I talked to her. I said, this is unacceptable. I did this. I've been here 15 years. I've given my heart and soul to this place. I want to talk to him. She went back and talked to him and he goes, it is what it is. I mean, it is, I mean, it's going to, I was blown away. And so that's just a real-time example of he knows that I'm going to do the job and I'm going to sit there and take it. And so that's just something that although that's a real-time challenge that's happening in this day and age in a male-dominated society, I think.
I'd like to add to that. Don't be afraid. All these women here in the audience, don't be afraid to change jobs. There's not a job that's the end of the world job. It doesn't exist. I've been in the work field now for close to 45 years, and I can tell you there's always another job out there, and don't be afraid to go get it. And don't think that if you're unhappy in a job that you have to stay, because maybe in the back of your mind you think, well, maybe I won't get as good of a job as this. There's a lot of jobs out there, a lot of jobs. And don't stay in a job that's not good for you. That can become your biggest challenge in your career.
I think one more thing on top of that, leaving that culture. When I left where I was to come here, when the president called me for my interview, because she wasn't here on my on-campus interview, she called me, and the first thing, because I asked all through the on-campus and then on the phone interview, was, what is the culture like there? Because you have to, you want to be able to have people that you work with that will lift you as you rise, and you lift others as you rise. It's the other people that are the women that don't like to support you because they're competitive and they don't want to see you succeed. Those are the individuals you don't want to associate with. So.
And I would second what she says, even in a field like the law. I've been in the law ever since I was trained for journalism, but I didn't stay in it long because they paid men more than women. And I thought that was boring, and I watched a trial and thought I could do that. So I went to law school. But even in an area like the law, I think that you spend the first 5 years figuring out what you don't want to do, and then you can find different areas of the law to learn what you do want to do. There's prosecution, there's civil law, there's law office practice, there's politics, there's government relations, there's working for different entities. I mean, I joke when people read my resume or tell me that people will say, geez, you've done this and that and that and that. And I just say, yeah, I can't hold a job, can I? But I have been in the same field for more than 40 years now, and I've been in different capacities in the civil and criminal, so don't be afraid to explore. You're not stuck in there. I started out wanting to be a writer. I still want to be a writer, and I'm going to be maybe when I retire, but I actually have been writing in the law for 35 years now. I've been writing every day. So there are a lot of ways that you can start in one direction and branch out, but still be heading towards the same accomplishments or the same parts of yourself that you want to explore or express.
The biggest challenge in your career could be yourself. Don't be afraid to make that mid-career life change in your career. I mean, don't be afraid to do it. I mean, that's one of the things that the field I'm in, which is librarianship. Librarianship is notorious for being a mid-career change. Like somebody worked at the government, in a government job for 20 years, got bored, went and got their master's degree, and then spent the rest of their life as a librarian. Don't be afraid to make that midlife career change. It could be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Thank you. So our next question, and I'm going to work with this and get the screensaver turned off. I know you can't see it, but the rest of the folks can. Art, Yvonne can help me with that. Thank you. What advice can you give women who are pursuing careers in male-dominated fields?
For me, I would say find a great mentor,
Yes.
and or be a mentor to someone else. I have a mentor right now, and he's in the company, but in a different area. He's not in HR, and I really value his open, honest feedback on how I'm doing, and it's really helped me grow and keep learning to be a better person and manager. So yeah, I would say find one. And sometimes it's like you have to ask them to be your mentor, and that's a little bit awkward, but everyone's generally really happy that you asked, so go for it.
But if there isn't one around, don't be afraid to make it known that you can do it anyways. I didn't have a mentor. There weren't many women in what I was doing. Every job that I worked as a prosecutor in, I was the first woman in or the only woman in for a long time. And the court I'm in now there are 4 judges, 3 of them are women, but that just changed for the first time 2 years ago. We've had 1 woman before me and 1 woman before her in all of these years. So don't be afraid to go out there and say, I want to do this. If they say no woman's ever done it before, well, that's her problem. I'm here. I'm ready. I'll do it. So I think have confidence in yourself and don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I didn't have a mentor, but I had a mother who told me that you can do whatever you want. Go do it. And I never did think there was any restriction on that until the men started trying to restrict me. And I just didn't take that very well.
I think when I'm at the table, especially being here where we're building 2 facilities, and I'm literally the only female in the room when I'm working with the construction and all these other individuals, I just would say, hold your ground and know that you know what you're talking about. And if they exclude you from meetings, go to your boss and say, I need to be in those meetings because we're either going to spend a ton of money now or we're going to spend triple that if you're not in the room because you have the experience. And so just hold your ground and have confidence. And sometimes I am always questioning myself, now you're kind of being it too hard now, you're at a new place. And so I'm trying to balance myself not being that person who's the bulldog, but also knowing that I know what I'm talking about. So
I want to add to that, which is you don't have to do it the male way also. And we get stuck in that, like the men know what they're doing. They've done this before. How could my idea be better than theirs? And some of that goes back to confidence. But I think your idea might actually be better than what they've already proposed or they've already paved the way doing. So have confidence in the ideas that you might have, because I think that really, you bring a different perspective, and that perspective actually might bring something different to the table.
I would just say persistence. I mean, it pretty much goes along the same lines as what everyone has said, but also flexibility. And this is really just going back to that what you all were saying, which really resonated with me. I thought that I wanted to be a foreign war correspondent for the New York Times. That was always my ultimate goal out of J school, and it didn't turn out. I had almost an internship with the LA Times, and then because of nepotism, I didn't get that job. So it got yanked away at the very last minute. So I got into weekly journalism that led me into business magazines. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I love magazine writing. I love magazine editing. And then I became an editor. And then I was the editor of Reno Magazine for 7 years. And then I got laid off. And then I started my own magazine. So, you just have to be kind of flexible with the changes, but also be very persistent and go after what you want and believe in yourself.
And you can learn a job on the way. There is real on-the-job training. My daughter she went to college in Northwestern and was going to become a chef, ended up working in Chicago as a manual writer for somebody that was putting together computers and things, ended up talking her way into a job in Texas as a magazine editor for all the small shop owners, the 7-Eleven guys and stuff. I said, you've never put together a magazine in your whole life, let alone written a story. And she said, so what? I can learn it. And she did learn it. And you can learn on the job. You learn every day when you watch other people and you say, I can do that better. You do. You learn on the job as well.
I'd like to add to that, if you are lucky enough to get the job, before you go to the interview, prepare. Because I've gone to a lot of job interviews in my careers. When I say careers, meaning more than one, because I did make a career change. going through enough interviews and you realize that there's usually a pattern in those interview questions. And whatever career that it is you're going to interview for, go on the internet and just look, type in that job title and then put in interview questions. And you might be very, very surprised that a lot of people who have been in, done interviews for that exact same position have already posted the types of questions that'll get asked. So, use, the technology out there to your advantage to prepare for the interview. Learn everything you can about that organization, the people within the organization. Go to the local library, look through the local database for the, newspapers, find out what's been going on at that company. Be prepared. Know everything about it before you go for that interview. And if you know in advance who the people are that are going to be interviewing you, find out about those people. Find out, if they've got something on the internet, on their LinkedIn account or whatever the account may be, to help, engage you in that conversation during the interview. And that'll pay off. It definitely will. But just be prepared. Don't go in there thinking, well, I've got this degree, and that'll make me prepared, because that will not, completely allow you to compete with the other people who are applying for that same job.
I would say if you are targeting a male-dominated field, to really be prepared to communicate, and communicate often with what is occurring in your experience with that job. Because I think that oftentimes as women, we just sort of like, oh, yeah, that guy was super rude, or that was a really rude comment, or that really wasn't appropriate, and you don't want to create a wave. You don't want to create a situation. And so it has, it's something that we do. And I think that if you're going to sort of put your helmet on and get into these fields, which you should, absolutely, just know that please be prepared to communicate, because I think that when you are making your mentor aware or your boss aware, or, you're helping to create the change that is needed, sometimes you're taking some hits, and you really want to make sure that you've got some allies in your workforce to sort of be there for you to help you along the way, and be constructive. Don't just complain and say so-and-so was super rude. An idea would be to say, hey, I think that maybe there's a culture education class that we need to have for this for the office, and we can all learn together on what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate when dealing with other people in the office. Those types of positive reinforcements are really great too, and tend to be very well received, versus just constantly, having the ear of somebody and making complaints. So that's just one piece.
I'd like to add one more thing, if nobody else is going to say anything right now. Constantly enhance your resume. Doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, constantly enhance your resume. Take those classes, take those seminars, take those conferences, and put it on your LinkedIn account, put it on your resume, just so when you do go for that interview, you're showing whoever's interviewing you that you are, on the ball with this career, that you're completely aware what's current, what's changing in the industry, and be prepared to talk about it.
And I want to add something to that. We had a keynote speaker here at TMCC in the fall of last year who talked about we are preparing our students here, and UNR as well, for jobs that do not exist yet. And they are going to have 6 to 10 careers, not jobs, 6 to 10 careers over the next 40 or 50 years. So in echoing what you said, get out ahead, find out what's the bleeding edge and the cutting edge and what's going to be needed, because really, look at the jobs we have today. When I was in school, webmaster? Yeah. What is that? Coding? What is that? So that would be just something I'm throwing in, that we had someone come in and share with us. And our final and fifth question, then we'll open it up for comments so we can kind of wrap back around and hear something else that maybe you thought about in one of the other questions. Is there anything that you would go back and do differently in your, life or career?
I always joke that I was retired first, because I spent the first part of what would be my career time playing and traveling and doing untraditional things. And one of the biggest quote unquote mistakes that I probably made was not saving for my future and like still looking at the fact that one day that I was going to retire. So looking at that today, I'm like, oh yeah, those 15 years when I was totally goofing off, I was just putting away a little bit of money that really could go a long way in my future. So that would be the biggest thing that I think that I would say as far as looking back on my regrets.
I think for me, I took a really long time to find my voice. Early on in my career, I was the polite, silent child at the dining room table, and that just kind of carried on through my 20s and early 30s, where I would always wait until everyone else stopped talking, and then I would say something, and usually the idea or whatever was already said. So I wish I had raised my hand a lot more often in class, at the dinner table, and throughout my early years of my career. And so for me, what I do now is I do the popcorn, and I call on women in meetings, you know, Sally, you're a little quiet. What are your ideas? And really try to draw people out of that situation, I guess. And so I want to make sure that we hear everybody at my meetings and things like that. So,
But you create a safe space for them to do that.
absolutely, absolutely.
I would say that I would probably want to engage more and sooner in my career. I really spent quite a few years as sort of the lone wolf in the office, where I truly came in, shut my door, and I tried to separate myself as much as I could, because I was trying to be that person that, you know, needed to prove themselves early on. And you realize that when you do that, you don't really have a voice, and you're not communicating as you should. And when these things do occur with perhaps men or women in the office, you don't realize that perhaps you're just not the only one that's happening to. And so I think from that standpoint, it might be advisable just for me, and also perhaps for you, to just, you know, start communicating early, and don't isolate yourself so much in your workforce, even if that means having to literally ask your boss to create a mentor for you, or create a lifeline, so that you feel like you can be heard.
I'll add one thing. If you're young and you're in school, don't stop at your bachelor's degree. When you get your bachelor's degree, don't take time off. Go straight through and get your master's or higher. Don't stop, because for women, that's one of the big career killers in life. Because the earning potential that you have with an AA, a BA versus a master's or further is huge. So when you think about it, you know, as a woman, you really have about, you know, maybe 4 decades, maybe 4.5 decades to really get your career done. And it is really amazing how quickly that time goes by. And if you think about it, each decade is like 10 years, right? So you got that block of time, 4 blocks of time of which to finish your career. What you make in the 20s and 30s versus what you're going to make in 40s and 50s with that advanced degree is going to be tremendous. So, you know, as a career, looking back on myself, the one thing, if I could do over, would be not take off that time. I got married after my bachelor's degree. I got married and just, you know, did the wife thing for a while. And then when the marriage ended, now all of a sudden I'm on 1 income again instead of 2. And you have to start thinking to yourself, wow, all that time that I lost, that decade of time that you've lost in your earning potential, if you'd stayed in school and gotten that advanced degree, making up that decade of financial, I don't know what the word would be, not crisis perhaps, but that financial difficulty that you have to overcome in a midlife situation like a divorce, that advanced degree can make the difference between an easy transition or an uneasy transition. So like I said, if I had to go back and do one thing differently, it would have been never have stopped with my bachelor's degree. I would have gone straight on and got my master's, which I did eventually later on. But that earning potential made a big difference.
I think something I was thinking about, what would I have done differently? There's a lot of talk nowadays about being present, being in the moment. You know, it's a big thing. We use a lot of meditation and stuff, believe it or not, in our court programs and things like that. Don't constantly be working towards the future. be present in what you're doing now. Learn what you're doing now, love what you're doing now, and if it works into something else, better. But don't keep waiting for the next biggest thing to happen. I remember thinking when I was a kid that no one's going to take me seriously as an adult till I'm 25. Well, guess what? I ran away and got married when I was 19. Okay, had a kid when I was 20. That's pretty adult stuff. To think that you don't fit into the adult world yet because it hasn't happened yet. Don't keep waiting for the next thing, because I think that limits you to looking at the opportunities and fulfilling your potential to know that, hey, I can do that. I can do that. And in fact, I might be able to do that, or do that a different way, or take what I've done and learned here and do it someplace else. So don't just keep waiting to make yourself better and better for something that's going to happen in the future. Enjoy every bit of it while you're doing it. And, it may be that this is what you want to do. Maybe that you don't need to be the one in the future. A lot of people commented to me because I didn't run for judge until I was 60 years old. And I said, so I did all these other things I love to do. And then they said, well, you're running for the lowest level of judge. You're running for municipal judge. Why don't you run for something that, shows all your years in prosecution, whatever. And I said, I want to go where people have their first experience with the law and see if I can make that a better experience for them. And we were getting started in specialty court then, and I wanted to do that because I'd learned about that after sending people to prison and after working in corrections and finding out all the correctional programming we didn't do. We built a system trying to do, but it seemed to be the lowest place for a judge, seemed to be the place where I could put all my pieces together. And so it's almost like I've come full circle in my career. But I wonder if I could have known that sooner if I hadn't have been just, a lawyer's got to do this way, then that way, then that way. Because I didn't work my way up through a law firm. I don't want to carry anybody else's briefcase,
I would just say diplomacy, because frankly, I think because I was raised by hippies and I was taught to distrust the man and to think for yourself and be a loner and a creative type, that when I got into journalism, I was fighting and trying to get my ideas out there, and then I would be in the middle of the office politics, and I hated that. And so I think looking back at my career, if I was able to talk to my younger self, I would try to be more diplomatic. And I would always listen to other people's ideas, but I didn't often agree. So it's how do you deal with those inter-office politics, and how can you be more diplomatic in your work environments? Because that I would have rose much higher, much faster if I had. But I was, very distrustful and had my own ideas and was very strong-willed. So that's something that I think, looking back, I would have done differently.
I probably would have not taken 10 years to get my doctorate. I probably would have done it in 3 years and not had debt. And then I would have saved more, because that was ridiculous. Because my dad, going through college and stuff, I was fortunate to have a dad who was paying my credit card, and I would get parking tickets, and he would come to college and pay for all my parking tickets. So he didn't teach me any lessons. And so eventually I get into my adult life, and I'm like, woo, I have to pay for that. You know what I mean? So I would have saved too. And then I also, and this is full disclosure, but I went from Arizona State University, we were the Pac-10 at the time, and I was a walk-on, but then I earned my scholarship, and I was a starter and all this other stuff. And so I'm out I got my master's. I didn't wait, got my bachelor's, master's. And then I was going into the coaching world, and so I went to Minnesota State Mankato as a Division II school, and I thought I was it. Like, I was 26 to 28, and it was my first coaching job and all this other stuff. And I now that I'm older, I big-timed them. I big-timed them, and I now look back on that, and I wish I would have curbed my behavior. And just be careful when you get out in the world. Don't big-time people. Be humble. So I wish I was a little bit more humble then. So.
Any more true confessions here?
I have a lot of them.
Do any of you panelists want to rope back around and add into something that you thought of before we move into the question and answer period? That you had an aha moment when someone else was speaking?
I'd like to say something. When I was elected district attorney, I learned a whole lot of things about myself. I was 40 by then. I'd been in the prosecution business for 15 years or so. And I learned then that I couldn't expect everybody to push at the level that I pushed myself at, and to hold themselves to the level of perfection that I held myself at, because all of a sudden I became the boss of 40 attorneys, and some of them aren't good at this or aren't good at that. And what I really found is, especially if you're going to get to the point where you're managing people or where you're leading people, is you have to, there's room for everybody. Not everybody's in the right job or doing the right thing, but you have to recognize that there are different standards and ways of doing things, and you have to find, if you're the boss, you've got to find a place for everybody to do what they can do, the best they can. And that was sort of humbling for me, because I had to, I bought the line that I had to be better than the guys and work harder and prove more and all that, which I did. And then I got in there and thought, well, there's one of the guys that's working for me now, and he doesn't work nearly as hard as I do. You have to learn that everyone is different, and you have to learn to, as I said, find the right place for each person if you have the luxury of being able to do that. And if not, find a way to make them better or more comfortable in what they do, and find a way to not I think an environment where people aren't competing and fighting with each other for the next position is a lot better to work in than, people that are kicking each other and stepping on each other and trying to get there because they're trying to prove themselves. You don't have to prove yourself. You have to do what makes you feel good and what enables you to give back what you're good at. That's what you have to do.
Well, we will open this up. Thank you very, very much. That was wonderful. And now, if the audience has some questions, it is time for your questions. I'm sorry? They're opening up as we speak. So I have microphone, or if you just want to ask.
Question. I've got a big enough voice.
Okay.
First of all, thank y'all for coming. I am disappointed that more of my students didn't come in here, especially since I have so many female students that are constantly writing about a lot of the issues that y'all address. And I'm like, stop and come to this, because this is what y'all need. But they will be watching it because it's on video, so especially those students that are going to be writing about some of this stuff. So you have a larger audience. They just have to, they're not here. Karen, you said something that really caught my attention, because I was raised primarily by women. All my dad, my grandfather, a bunch of uncles, they all died when I was young. So my mother, grandmothers, stepmothers, and they're just the pinnacles of character for me. My wife was a cop, was a cop. She's a stay-at-home mom now. So she was in a field dominated by men, excuse me. And my wife and I have all kinds of conversations that had predominantly male perspective my entire life, and I've never heard a woman say what you said, and that is you should compartmentalize your time. Anytime I've had discussions kind of between the sexes and discussions between the sexes, that's a term that always gets used for men. We're really good at compartmentalizing our stuff. And even my wife and I have a discussion. I'm sort of a one-track. I need to do one thing and then get it done and move to the next. I'm like one tab open on the computer screen. My wife is like, I'm 17 tabs, and I'm working on all of them all the time. And I go, that sounds like madness. And so, here's my question, and it's for everybody. Is compartmentalizing, I don't want to say a male trait because it sounds, sexist, but I feel like I've never heard a woman say that. I try to compartmentalize. Men, we do it naturally. But is that hard as a female? I don't know.
I will just say it's been an evolution for me because I was that multitasker and going through and really, as your schedule gets stacked and you are busier and busier, at least for me, I've come to an aha moment for myself and say, this does not work for me. What does work for me is that, between the hours of 6 and 7 a.m., if I'm not doing my workout and done by 7, it does not get done that day. And I have to own that for myself, knowing that there's very few things that I can control later in my day, but there's a few things that you can own your morning, really. And so for me, knowing that this is my schedule and I will absolutely follow what I say, and I do what's called a mind dump in the evening for the next day. These are my A things. I must do my workout today. I must this. I must that. These are things that are compartmentalized for me, that when I get into that zone or that time block, if I'm not doing that, I drop what I am doing to go do that. I have found tremendous success doing that, and often people have asked me, Karen, how in the world do you do this career and then go to rehearsal from 7 to 9:30 in the evening and then perform on the weekends and then get up at 5 a.m. and do it all over again? For me, I must compartmentalize that day so that I have the breaks that I need, I have the sleep that I need, and I truly do that. But you have to follow yourself. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to, 6 to 7, I'm going to work out. But then if you're constantly saying, oh, there's something else to do, and you're not minding your own schedule, so to speak, you fall out of that. So it's sort of like a must-do to just say, ding, maybe there's like a bell in your head, and you actually do that for the next hour. And even in business, when I am having to, you're constantly in growth mode in regards to acquiring new clients, you have to compartmentalize that as well and say, I need to drop everything I'm doing, and for this hour, I am working on my prospect list. And so that, when I started doing that, and I have learned that through a business coach, by the way, so this is not something I just came up with on my own, but yeah, things changed drastically.
I'll add to that. I think women are caretakers. We are nurturers. That isn't just a stereotype. That's true of our nature. And we're expected to feed the cat and to feed the kids and to start the laundry, even if your husband finishes it up and puts it in. Or, I didn't know my husband cooked for 15 years. And he cooked dinner one day, and I said, where did this come from? And he said, well, I can cook. I just stayed out of your way because you really like to cook. I cooked because I was single mom for so many years and had to cook in order to eat with me and my daughter. So I think women, by their nature, take on all these tasks because we want to please everybody and we have all these things to do. And take what she says to heart. If you have the ability to say no, I heard somebody real smart one day say no is a complete sentence.
I think there's also some brain science behind it as well, is if you keep stopping and starting and kind of, whack-a-mole all day long, you're never going to get anything done because your brain can't continue to focus. I don't know exactly where I read that, but I read that somewhere. I took it to heart. So I actually have a schedule where I block out time for personal and doctor's appointments and, and focused work and when I'm going to go work out. And I'm holding myself to that schedule and making it happen. Early on in my career, I tried to do everything. And so again, prioritizing skiing and doing that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the day, I really feel like I actually did something versus just chasing and whack-a-moling all day long. So,
for me, just kind of as an afterthought of this whole event, I was really lucky in the sense that I had a really, really strong mother. So I learned a lot about strength from her. However, the one thing after my mom passed away that I learned is that there were other ways to draw strength from the females in my life besides, my mother, who has since passed. And one of the ways I discovered that was through doing family history, which is kind of what, if you remember the introduction, I teach the genealogy lab here on campus. And the one thing that I found was by exploring the history of my female ancestors, I really drew a lot of strength from that, because when I realized that the obstacles that the women before me, whose blood runs through my veins, whose DNA runs through my veins, the obstacles they overcame were absolutely so much larger than anything I've ever faced in my life. And I think that that's one of the reasons I really love doing what I do here so much, is because I try to show other women in my class where they can draw the strength from in their personal lives as well. Because it really is truly amazing, the people who came before you, which allowed you to have your life, really were so much stronger in so many ways than we ever were. I mean, if you think about the obstacles of a woman who may have had 12 children, in their lifetime and lost half of them before she was 50, or when you realize that you bury 3 husbands, or overcame an epidemic, a flu epidemic. My father's he lost like 4 of his brothers and sisters inside of 2 months to the flu epidemic. When you realize the hardships that other people overcame before you, and you write about it, you learn about it, you research it, and it becomes part of you. And when you face that everyday situation that all women do every minute of their life, knowing where you got that strength from can help.
Anybody else on that one?
Question that sort of goes with that. So this is the end of Women's History Month, right? So I'm wondering what everyone's influences or inspirations are throughout their life that are women.
I'll start. My grandmother is 96 this year, and until about 85, she played tennis every day. In the 70s, she had a double mastectomy, and she swears that tennis was her lifeline, and that was the way that she was able to sort of go forward without having a breast, because in the 70s, that was like pretty new to just have no boobs. Anyway, so she played tennis actively, and she called me one day, and she speaks with a British accent, even though she's came over on a boat a million years ago. And she said, "Darling, I know you can understand. I haven't played tennis in weeks, and it's killing me, And she wanted to share that with me because she knew that I liked kayaking, and that when I couldn't kayak, it kind of affected my moods. And so she still is an amazing role model, because she prioritized tennis. She had 4 kids. They would come and they would sit and they would watch her play tennis. My mother talks about being tied to a tree for this tennis game that her mother was playing, because that was more important. But so those athletics in her life, and again, she was playing tennis when there weren't a lot of women that were playing tennis, and that was kind of her thing. So she was a really important, strong role model to me, and still is to this day.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I'm still thinking.
Okay. I would say from the music side of me, there's a woman named Evelyn Glennie who is the world-renowned percussionist, and really growing up, and I didn't discover her until I was in high school, but for me, what made her so special was that she's deaf, and she's a percussionist, and she obviously takes her shoes off, and she is hearing the music from vibrations of sound.
Wow.
And so I thought, well, gosh, if she can do it, what are my excuses? And then for financial, the person who literally got me into this business was Susie Orman. And it was such a profound moment for me, and it was wonderful to meet her and obviously her wife, KT. But it was one of those moments, kind of like what Dorothy was saying, when, you hear someone talking and you're just like, that is for me. I can absolutely do that. The only thing I need to do is learn, and not be afraid to do that. So those, musically, two very special women.
Nice.
I would just, it's another kind of obvious in a way, but my mom was a huge inspiration to me. She still is, but she, when I was 10, my mom and dad got a divorce, and my mom had no education, no job skills. She was a stay-at-home mom, and suddenly, I don't want to talk poorly of my late father, but he didn't pay child support. He just kind of left her for another woman, and so she had to pull up her bootstraps and went to a community college. Here we are at a community college. college, Santa Barbara City College, and she got work to get her degree. And what's so crazy, this is, things happen for a reason. She looked in the paper, as you used to do, for a job, and she got a job as a secretary at Santa Barbara Magazine. And she went from being the secretary to the editor of the magazine within about 6 months. She had no skills in journalism. She had no education in journalism. She just was a huge reader and loved the written word. And she was very skilled. And the publisher gave her a chance. And she was the editor of Santa Barbara Magazine for 10 years. And she went from that to she followed this publisher as he created all these other international magazines, Resorts and Great Hotels Magazine, and Islands Magazine, and Showboats Magazine, and she was the editor for a lot of those, but especially Resorts and Great Hotels Magazine, where she got to travel around the world. And anyway, she was a huge inspiration. So she was able to support us kids and have a house, and just by the seat of her pants, man. It's amazing to me. So she's definitely a huge inspiration to me.
Already adding to what I already said, but adding to what you said as well, it would have to be my mother. But like I said, now that I know my mother's past, since I started doing the family history, now I know where that incredible strength came from that my mother had it within herself and passed on to me by knowing the obstacles that her mother and her mother's mother and her mother's mother's mother all overcame. So if I had to say that is the inspiration to who and what I am today, it would be all the women who came before me.
Oh, yeah, I'm still thinking.
Okay. Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. I would have to say, obviously, my mom, and then going through college would be my head softball coach at Arizona State University, who was pretty much part of my family. I lost my mom when I was 21, and I was actually on the field when it happened. And so she actually, my coach flew home for my mom's funeral and to Reno, and then flew back, and then I went back and finished the season and stuff. And then, so my head coach is very special to me too, and had been a huge role model because I wanted to be her and have that career and be very smart like her. And then the former athletics director at the University of Nevada I worked for was Carrie Groth, and she's been she's very known nationally in the country with college athletics, and she's in a consulting firm and stuff, and so I learn a lot from her about the business and also being in the room with a lot of men and how to handle yourself and stuff. So I'd say those three individuals.
Well, I'm going to add to the list of our moms here, but as I said, I didn't have a mentor in the law. I didn't have a mentor in journalism. I just learned what I saw happening around me. Model, demonstrate to your children how to survive, how to persevere, how to get the next job if you lose that job, how to stand up for yourself. I think that through the different things that I watched my mother do and go through to make her own choices, to make her own careers, to leave a bad marriage and get into a good one, whatever it was, until I was old, 60 maybe, I don't think I really stopped to think where I learned all this. But I realized, I finally said one day, my mom never taught me how to cook, but she taught me what great food is about. She taught me to love cooking and to learn it because she put great meals on the table. So it's what I lived, it's what I saw around me happening. And as a judge, I see the bad side of that all the time. Kids learn what they see happening at home. And I tell them, you go back and demonstrate to your child what you should have done, not what you've done, and how you're going to make this better, and how you're going to turn this around or whatever. But you soak it up. We're sponges. We soak it up. So look around you and find some place you can soak up the good from.
I was still waiting. It's a hard question. I had a traditional mother that, pretty much stayed home. I guess I would say both of my grandmothers were early graduates from college, class of 1918 at Cal, first nursing school, things like that. But I never really knew them well enough for them to be inspirational. So I guess I would go to, like, the owners of Patagonia are very inspirational to me. They are always pushing and asking their employees to be innovative and creative to solve, the environmental crisis in the world. So I would say the most of my growth has been as an employee at Patagonia. That's really inspired me and encouraged me to grow and learn. So I think that's where I'm going.
Other questions? We do have time left.
I have a question.
Anne, what's your
It
question?
sounds like you're all very engaged and passionate about what you're doing. And Judge Holmes, you touched on doing writing, but wanting to do more writing in the future. And I wondered if the rest of you had either another dream career or a passion you want to pursue, or if you were doing something different than what you're doing now in the future. Is there anything that you can comment on about that?
I peaked about 10 years ago, so now I'm coming down the other side. I'm sorry. No, I'm going for the double peak, actually. That's what I tell people. Honestly, I am at a very good place right now in my career and my home life. I have a young family, so I feel like for me, it's being in the present. I'm not looking far away.
Well, I've had lots of different journeys. My career's kind of done this, where I love the outdoors and being outside, and passion for the environment and studying biology as an undergrad, and then marrying that with business. So I'm kind of in a really great place at Patagonia because they encourage me to get outside, But yeah, being a comedy writer for Saturday Night Live, probably a little far-reaching, but, I'm still pretty young, not that young, but, there's lots of stuff. I still love the movie business and dream about getting back to doing that again once all the kiddos are out of the house.
I hear Just for Laughs is hiring.
Yeah, I'll come out and say essentially that this will not happen while my wife is still living, but I always thought it would be really, really great to run for office, and knowing that my wife will not have that. But, maybe like when I'm 70 or 75, and she won't care at that point, I think. But I so enjoy what I do now. It would be really tough, but that has definitely crossed my mind, certainly out there.
I love to mountain bike. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love my job. I think I'm in a great place, but it's a lot of work all the time, and it's a hamster wheel. So I would like to get off the hamster wheel at some point, and maybe write some books and mountain bike, and maybe lead tours on my mountain bike or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
For me, being a librarian is, for me, the best job that I could ever have, because I really, really, really enjoy research, and I enjoy teaching other people how to do research. And I found that although I'm only a few years away from, technically the end of your career, so to speak, I feel that my next career is going to be the same as the last career. I'm just going to take it to a more personal level. I just published my first book. It's a very, very small book, but I took the plunge. It's something I've been talking about doing for over 20 years now, and I finally did it. And that gave me the confidence now to start a bigger project. I've started my outline for my next project, which will take, probably a couple years to do. And then, my next project after that, and the next project. So I think, my next career will be just taking my current career and making it more personal and preserving my own family's history and heritage.
Well, I raced BMX bikes when I was little, and so I wish I could be a professional mountain bike racer. It probably will not happen. But I love where I'm at in higher education. I like the impact we have on students. I know I'm an athletics director, but I think there's a lot of growth potential in me and being in higher education, and I would love to run for public office, but I think where I'm probably going to rein that in is I would love to be a region. I think I can be a region because I think there needs to be a little bit more perspective on the board of regents, and I think that might be something that I would go for later on in my career. So.
And I'm going to be her mother. I'm going to start traveling again. I got a little taste of traveling when I was young. I was in the DA's office for 5 years and then left that to go to the State Department. But then I met my husband and didn't stay with the State Department, but he took me traveling a little, so we got to see some Europe and the Middle East, and then came back and then didn't go anywhere for 30 years. So I'm eager to start traveling again, and I'll write for the magazines that you're all part of.
Any other questions?
I have one more, if I may. And I really kind of asked this for my wife, because she went from being a cop, busting bad guys in Union County, California. She was going to keep it on the force. She loved it. She misses it. We had a son, and we both decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home because she didn't want to be at risk. You know, it was a very dangerous job. And she's going through this sort of identity crisis of she doesn't feel as useful. And she doesn't feel like she's doing bigger things, even though raising her son is huge. But I understand where she's coming from. It's a complete life change. And so my question is, like, what advice would you have? Because you've all been very successful in the public sector. I mean, probably the private sector too. I don't know personally. But what advice do you have, like, for stay-at-home moms who feel like I'm not out there doing all the wonderful things that we're all doing in public? She's just doing great, right?
How old's your kid?
He's only 19 months.
Oh, she needs to stay where she is and do what she's
in the right
doing.
spot.
Those first 3 years are when he learns how to love the rest of the world and how to accept the world. It's, it's called attachment theory. I've learned all this in doing my specialty court stuff. But that's when she teaches him everything about becoming an independent individual who will trust the world and love the world and try things himself and develop relationships and what have you. But I know it's so hard because I was investigating international narcotic smugglers when my son was 3 years old, and I got into my, person A thing and worked all day and all night trying to put cases together and grand juries and all this stuff. And I remember my son at 3 years old saying to me one time, "Mommy, why do you like Cyril Mancuso more than you like me?" Now, he knew that Cyril Mancuso was the man I was indicting as an international smuggler, which I did. But that cut me to the core, and he's 34 years old, and I still think of that all the time. She's doing what she was intended to do now. She can go back and become a cop. She can go back and become a detective. She can teach cops. She can teach in the academy. She can go to law school. She can do all kinds of things. But right now is her time to create this little person that is going to make his contribution to the world. And so balance isn't this way. Balance is this way, that way, that way. We all put ourselves down. We all think we're not doing good enough or we're not good enough to do that. We all do that. But you've got to support her, and she's got to know how much you appreciate what she's doing, because this person you guys created together, and you want him to be the best person in the whole world. Her time, she can get back into whatever she wants to do with what she does. It's hard business. We've got 2 or 3 women in our court that are marshals, that are law enforcement officers for us, and a couple of them has little kids, and it's tough. A couple of them has boys that are becoming teenagers now, and that's tough. It's very hard to, and there shouldn't be lines, but to cross the lines, and there shouldn't be women's work and men's work, but we are the way we are no matter what kind of position we're in, and that is the caretaker, the nurturer, the whatever we do, the creative person, the whatever. We are what we are, but we've got to accept that and do what we're supposed to do while we're supposed to do it. She's right where she's supposed to be right now.
Go, you're good.
And volunteer too and have an impact on the community.
Absolutely.
You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
was just about to say, being on a board, I've been on a bunch of different boards, from Nevada Women's Fund to Urban Roots. I was on Nevada Women's Fund for 6 years, Urban Roots for 6 years, and now I'm on the board of the American Culinary Federation High Sierra Chefs. And that's not a full-time job by any means. This is probably not something she would do right now, but but maybe later she could kind of step into the work world or the world in general by being on a board that she is passionate about in some way.
I agree. I think that stimulation outside of like kid language and redirecting and all of the things that you do in a day when you have a child, as well as the other monotony, I think that her having the opportunity for an outlet to use her brain, whatever that may be, volunteering, etc., or just like adult time, so that she has a book club or something that allows her, again, to feel like she's part of a community and part of something outside of the home, because I think that that's a struggle. The days are long and the months are short.
And she has a great perspective that not a lot of women have, law enforcement.
Yeah.
I'd like to add, one of my nephews, his wife is a stay-home mother. They have 2 little children. I think the oldest one actually just started kindergarten, but she has a very nice artistic talent, and she started doing watercoloring and just doodling originally, and through Facebook everybody goes, oh, that's really great, wow, can you do one for me? And she started off painting people's pets in watercolor. And then she started painting people's homes in watercolor. And now she's doing portraits in watercolor. And she's got herself a nice little business. And so this last Christmas, she started a Christmas card business with, like customized pictures of the family on the Christmas card in watercolor. And she's doing really well. She's doing really, really well. She's a stay-home mom. She's got her studio there in the house, like a bedroom that's been converted to a painting studio. And so she takes care of the kids all day long. And then when her husband comes home, that's her time to go work on her business. And on weekends when he's home, she gets to work on her business as well. So, she seems to be finding that balance really well between, stay-at-home mom and her own personal business. So that might be something, I don't know, which talents your wife has as far as, starting her own little home business, but when I shouldn't say little, because that's not really at all what I meant to say, but starting a business, a small business originally, and work it up. And it seems to work very, very well for my nephew and his wife.
I think just in general, if as women we tend to just give and give and give, and then you deplete your bank, so you need to figure a way to put the deposit back in the bank, so to speak. So if it's serving on a board or tending a beautiful garden or really just being in the moment with your son, whatever deposit she has to put back in the bank so she feels whole, is kind of generally up to you guys to figure out. But yeah. Well, I'm not gonna really promote that, but yeah, come on down.
Any other questions? Yes. So you guys, women supporting women, really important. And we heard the term live as you rise, which sounds really great. But I'm curious of what that looks like in all of your respective careers and jobs. Like how would you lift as you rise?
If you have an opportunity.
Yeah.
If you have an opportunity at the place where you work, you put people on notice. Hey, I think this would be a great spot for you. I think you could grow in this position. You're lifting this person up into a new position if they're qualified, obviously, for it, and you can get them a good recommendation. Just this conference, I think you should go to this conference. We're taking all the females in the office. We're going to this conference because I think it's important. So you take them with you, and we're going to pay for it. Those are just 2 examples. That's lifting as you rise.
To me, it's the knowledge sharing. So it's not like hoarding my information. It's more, I learned this. Do you guys know how to do this? Let's talk about it, and we can share that. And I think for me, that's how I've gained a lot of my knowledge, is by working as a team and being able to share knowledge with people. I think sometimes when you're in a work environment, people hoard their knowledge, right? Because that's going to get them higher and higher. And I don't think that that's really a healthy way or a healthy work environment. So for me, it's definitely being able to share that information. I'm also able to look at people that I work with, and I consider the people that I work with friends of mine as well. I'm able to look at their strengths and say, hey, you should apply for this position because this is a good fit for you. And again, I don't have any control over the position or whatever it is, but it's easier for me to look at what their strengths are maybe than it is for them to recognize what their own strengths are.
And willing to look at a resume and say, okay, maybe term that differently.
Yes, exactly.
And making a call. making a call for you.
I like to invite people in to work at, free, of course, internships with our court. I'm 5 for 5 right now with people going to law school after they've done that. Now, one of my kids ever wants to be a lawyer or a judge, or in law enforcement, because they saw what I had to do when I was working in it. But I think giving people the opportunity to see and explaining to them what the job is and how you can help, how you can give back, how you can fix, how you can do whatever, I think that's really valuable too.
Along those lines also, we offer an internship every year. In the 10 years we've been publishing, I've worked with probably about 15 interns, and they mostly have been women, and that just feels really good to me to give back and teach.
I would agree with everything you all said because I've dealt with many interns over the years as well. And I don't know whether it's coincidence, they've always been female. In every job I've ever had, every intern I ever worked with was a female. So yes, internships.
Well, in closing, thank you all for being here. You were inspirational, you were motivational, and you were also extremely practical, which was great. So if we could just give a little appreciation to our panelists today. And thank you for being part of this event at TMCC, and thank you for what you do to support the women in your world, and for also supporting our students at TMCC by being here. So thank you again.